After the horrors of murder and abduction from the French and Indian War, the people of what is now south-central Pennsylvania thought that the killing was behind them after the defeat of the French and Indian forces in 1758. Peace existed once again on the frontier. Families returned to their homes and their fields and started their lives over in what was known as the Conococheague settlement. Suddenly in 1763, Chief Pontiac united the Indian tribes together to attack white settlers that continued to settle on Indian land, starting what is now known as Pontiac's War. This resulted in the British losing Forts Sandusky, Venango, LeBoeuf, and Presque Isle, along with Fort Detroit, Fort Pitt, Fort Ligonier, and Fort Bedford, falling under attack. In response, British Colonel Henry Bouquet led a force from Carlisle, Pennsylvania into western Pennsylvania to relieve a siege on Fort Pitt, clashing with Indian forces at the Battle of Bushy Run on August the 5th and 6th, 1763. By using Indian battle tactics, Bouquet's force defeated the native forces and relieved Fort Pitt, breaking the siege. This is the first time a British force successfully defeated a native force in a large battle. The defeat only angered the natives even more, resulting in raiding parties attacking settlers on the frontier in the spring and summer of 1764. Settlers on the frontiers of Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania were hit hard by attacking parties of Indian warriors, where once again men, women, and children of all ages were brutally murdered. This caused the governor of Pennsylvania to put bounties on Indian scalps of all sexes and age groups, promoting brutality against the native nations. Out of all this carnage and war came one of the most notorious raids recorded in this time of history. This incident occurred not that far from a little town of Greencastle, Pennsylvania today, on this very playground that I am sitting on a swing at and visiting today, and it is known as the Enoch Brown Massacre. So I remember when I was a junior in high school, I actually had a social studies teacher. Actually, he taught government, and I remember him coming to me because he actually lived on Enoch Brown Road, or at least close to it, and he didn't really know what Enoch Brown was, and he actually went to another teacher at the school who was a substitute at the time, who was very knowledgeable on history. And it was kind of funny because me being, I don't know, 16, 17 years old, this substitute teacher actually told this government teacher, well, do you know Dakota? Because he actually might know something about this, because my dad being a local historian and stuff. And to, I believe, my teacher's surprise, I was able to actually give him information on the incident that occurred here. But I just wanted to tell you that story, mainly to show the importance of education, not only of our educators, but also listening to other people who you might not necessarily expect to know certain things, such as a young child. Anyway, here is the entrance plaque to the Enoch Brown Park here, and let's go explore it, and we'll tell some stories. So John McCullough was a boy about 16 years old in 1764. In 1756, during the French and Indian War, John, who was 8 years old at the time, and his brother James, who was 5 years old at the time, were captured by Indians near what is now West Weaver Road, Greencastle, Pennsylvania today, which is actually not all that far from our location here at Enoch Brown. Now, John McCullough was adopted into the Lenni Lenape, or the Delaware Indian Nation, and he lived as an Indian in Ohio with that tribe until he was returned to European civilization later in the year of 1764. But while living with the natives in Ohio, he learned many of their customs, traditions, and had a viewpoint that many Europeans did not have at that time. John McCullough wrote, "Sometime in the summer of 1764, whilst we were living at Catoling, a great number of Indians collected at the forks of Muskingum, perhaps where were about 300 or upwards. Their intention was to come to the settlements and make a general massacre of the whole people, without any regard to age or sex. They were out about 10 days when the most of them returned. Having held a council, they concluded that it was not safe for them to leave their towns destitute of defense, most likely fearing European attacks on their native villages in search for money for women and children Indian scalps, since the scalping laws were in place. However, several small parties went on to different parts of the settlement. It happened that 3 of them, whom I was well acquainted with, came to the neighborhood of where I was taken from. They were young fellows, perhaps none of them more than 20 years of age. These young fellows made their way into the Cumberland Valley in the Conacajig settlement in late July of 1764. On the morning of July 26th, 1764, 11 children, despite the threat of Indian raiders in the area, gathered at a small schoolhouse located here at this spot. Their thoughtful Christian schoolmaster of high integrity, as he was described, was Enoch Brown. And he started his class with his 11 pupils when suddenly 3 young Indians rushed in. Enoch Brown begged for the Indians to kill him and spare the children, but the Indians intended to kill everyone in the schoolhouse. The Indians clubbed Enoch Brown in the head and also the children and scalped them, killing the schoolmaster and 10 students. From among the carnage of dead bodies inside the schoolhouse rose a 10-year-old boy named Archie McCullough. Archie was scalped alive, but somehow escaped the death blow given to his schoolmaster and his young classmates. Archie hid inside a fireplace of the schoolhouse for a while until he departed the schoolhouse and came here to a spring that was close by to wash his wounded head that was missing a piece of skin and a patch of hair. Local farmers visited the schoolhouse several hours later to discover the bodies, and then they came down here just a little bit from the schoolhouse down over the hill, and they discovered young Archie McCullough down here at this spring. And I'll show you a picture, but they actually have a nice plaque here commemorating Archie McCullough and his experiences down here. He came down here and he had to wash himself off, and then that's where they found him. This is also the spring where Enoch Brown and his students would have drank from at the school. A few days later, the community actually gathered to bury the bodies of Enoch Brown and his 10 pupils. They were placed in one large wooden box and buried in an unmarked grave just a few yards from the schoolhouse. And actually we are here at the gravesite. It now is marked thanks to community efforts in the 1800s, but it's just down the hill from where the schoolhouse would have been, which is the main marker that we were at earlier. Now Archie McCullough, the boy who lived, managed to live a long life, but he was scarred from the loss of his scalp. Now several children did not attend school that day, and one of the more interesting stories was that of James Poe. And James Poe actually played hooky, and he sat in a tree and watched a local farmer mow hay instead of going to school. He returned home at the normal school day time, and when he was asked where he had been, he replied that he had been at school. He was unaware of the horror that occurred that day, but his parents were. He was beaten for his lie. John McCullough, who was Archie's cousin who lived with his Lenni Lenape attackers in Ohio, wrote about the return of the young fellows that conducted the Enoch Brown massacre. He says, they came to a schoolhouse where they murdered and scalped the master and all of the scholars, except one, who survived after he was scalped, a boy about 10 years old and a full cousin of mine. I saw the Indians when they returned home with the scalps. Some of the old Indians were very much displeased at them for killing so many children, especially Neepawes, or Nightwalker, an old chief or half-king. He ascribed it to cowardice, which was the greatest affront he could offer them. In the mid-1800s, an excavation was conducted that discovered the unmarked gravesite of Enoch Brown and his 10 murdered students. In 1884, during the Franklin County Centennial Convention, it was proposed to raise money to purchase land where the Enoch Brown massacre occurred and the gravesite, and to raise a monument that would be appropriate to mark the spot. The official dedication ceremony occurred on August the 4th, 1885. Now, the site is Enoch Brown Park, part of the Antrim Township, and contains walking trails, playground, a pavilion, picnic tables, and restroom facilities, and is open 8 a.m. to sunset from April to November. Life on the Pennsylvania frontier in the 1750s and early 1760s was hard and dangerous. Around the time of the Enoch Brown massacre, a large mass of men was being put together in nearby Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to travel with Henry Bouquet, who was a colonel, into Ohio to end Pontiac's war by forcing the Indians to capitulate and recover captives such as John McCullough. The goal was to end the risk to the frontier once and for all. But with the Enoch Brown massacre and similar instances, hundreds of soldiers gathered in Carlisle deserted to return to their homes to protect their families from the native warriors that were raiding their settlements. The request by settlers for paid protection by European men who were trained to combat the Indian forces using Indian war tactics, that was very successful in Bushy Run, by the way, that was denied by the colonial government of Pennsylvania. And time again, the British military was ineffective in protecting against these devastating raids. The Enoch Brown massacre was the worst of the many brutal instances experienced by these frontier people, and one of many reasons why hatred of the Native American race became a norm on the frontier. But the lack of protection by the governments of colonial America, both colonial and British governments, became a large issue of the people of the western frontier. It was this lack of protection that began the distrust in the government that eventually pushed these frontier people to join their fellow Americans on the eastern seaboard to, in one united voice, to rebel against the British government 12 years later. As for the memory of the heroic schoolmaster Enoch Brown, he is memorialized not only here as a hero, but as a hero that he truly was on the National Monument to Fallen Educators, where his name is inscribed in stone for eternity. He is listed as the earliest educator on that monument to lose his life in the line of duty of educating our nation's youth. The monument is located in Emporia, Kansas. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it and enlightened by it. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more.